What is going on, everybody? Hope you're having a great Thursday. I just want to say something. I'm not going to want any more fast starts in baseball. I don't want to see myself winning 50,000, 100,000, 75,000 in the first couple hours. And by the way, with the late games like loaded up too in these situations. Yesterday was a great example. Boston was going. We're off to the races. 3 big home runs out there against, and all the guys 5% ownership, 3% ownership, sometimes 1% ownership. It was looking beautiful, and not that everything collapsed. I ended up doing fine, but it was not a big winning night. And it's just every night this week I've had that immediate fast start, and I haven't made money this week, and it's just been a little frustrating. So I'm going to ask that the DFS gods out there, they give me a couple hours till I start doing well, and then after 2 or 3 hours, maybe I can feel a little bit more excited, because it's been a little frustrating that the late games have not gone my way lately. With that said, we were on to some good things yesterday. Thanks again to Rody, who was great for stopping in. And we're going to definitely have him on as much as possible, as much as he's able to. And Sheets, how are you doing out there? How'd you do last night? And then let's get into today.
I did actually, it's funny, I did actually pretty nicely on the site that I didn't think I was going to do as well on. I saw what you saw, that I got off to a really, really good start in the Monster on FanDuel. And that just kind of fizzled a little bit. And then, and then DraftKings, I did pretty well, actually. I had, and I'm not exactly sure how. I ran really hot, with, like I said, with the Bostons. I almost, thank God I didn't come really, really close, because the last thing that I did was I had, Fetty in one of my bigger buy-ins. I just didn't have it in me to do it. So I switched it around a little bit, went down, played Cease and did something else. And that had to cost me $1,000. That cost me something. Overall, did pretty well on DraftKings, not as well on FanDuel. And what was really fun was, for those of you that are watching, we were considering playing the showdown slate last night, the San Francisco and then LA one. And so just for fun, I just ran my stuff and ran a couple of lineups, and I came up with, it was funny, I had 45% this guy I never heard of, this reliever. So he spent 10 minutes talking about it in the chat, and then I ended up not playing. And then it turns out that Adam from the chat came in and said, "Oh, by the way, that dude actually had struck out the side for 8.25 fantasy points." So we went and I checked it today, and that guy, that Jay Jackson, actually would have been optimal. Only 1% of all showdown slate participants played him. And so I was a little not pissed, but I was really within 2 seconds just putting in those lineups. But as it turns out, I was able to back check and see how they would have done. And believe it or not, even with 45% a guy who was basically optimal, I wouldn't have even cashed in any of the 20 lineups.
Oh man,
that's pretty funny though, right? Well, because I had the Beatty and some of these other Dodgers that that didn't do anything. And
I know he just needed anything at all from the Dodgers, and it was the ones, if anything.
But it was a fun slate, and ready to get back after it today.
Yeah, I mean, it was. First of all, that's so bound to happen. How often do we see this happen? Where I say to you, and most of the time, I actually, I'm coming from a good point. You're saying, well, maybe he gets you 8 fantasy points, and I'm going, how's he going to get 8 fantasy? What's he going to come in and he gets to strike out the side and pitch one inning exactly with nothing else to happen? And that's exactly what happens. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? When I saw that, I was just like, oh my God. I'm glad you didn't play, because if I somehow talked you off of it in any way.
Right.
All right, let's pull up today's slate, and it's a nice little 8-gamer. Sheets, I've been a little bit opposite this year in baseball. I've really, really done well on these small slates, and haven't done so well on the 15 gamers, which is, as you know, historically sort of my MO is give me the biggest slate possible. I want to get every possible thing out there, and I want to figure out every angle. And lately, it's been the smaller slates that have been good to me, and we've got a smaller one tonight. So hopefully that trend continues for me and for everybody out there as well. Let's get into it game by game. Any sort of overall, I guess it's hard with baseball to say overall thoughts on the slate. This is sort of a middling slate. I think you're going to have different options, and I don't think that, to me, at first glance, and just look at the run totals, things don't really jump out in any area, especially as opposed to, which is just different than how it's been. We've usually got the 6.5 team run total. So that's just sort of my first thoughts, but anything that you've noticed that you feel like you have to play or?
Well, yeah, but my initial thought was that how many games is this?
8, I believe.
On an 8-game slate, I mean, I could make cases for at least for 6 pitchers,
Yep.
And there's one that I'm not playing who you're probably going to like. I think you usually like him more than I do. We'll get to him. And maybe you won't. And then I do like a couple of hitting environments. And just as a matter of true transparency, I couldn't help myself. So I went into actually the SaberSim chat, and I was like explaining, I was giving them props. Well, listen, I ran lineups using your optimizer with my projections, and we almost came up with the optimal in the freaking showdown slate, whatever it is. So the guy said to me, "Hey, dude, if you're in the mood to play, Tigers Rangers showdown slate at 115 today." And I'm like, all right, so I'm gonna try it.
I love the baseball showdowns. I actually think they're really good. So when there's good sized tournaments, let's do it.
Dude, I mean, like in Tigers Rangers, it's $5K for first, and that's probably, my joke was, that's probably going to exceed the total ticket receipts for that game. Rangers at Detroit, so we'll see. Okay, so you want to?
Yeah, let's do the game by game. Atlanta, Philadelphia. You go ahead and start it off, and I'll jump in.
So my take is that I have interest in Atlanta, both pitching and hitting. I have Morton rated as one of the top 6 options. Everybody's so tight that I hesitate to say who I like the best, but we'll get to that. But Morton is certainly in my list of pitchers to play. And currently, right now, I do have Atlanta as my top overall stack, combining both raw points and value. And I'm looking at Albies, Freeman, Jock Peterson, Riley. I mean, all the guys. Riley, even Heredia, if you have to. So that's where I'm at. I have, unfortunately, I'm kind of going against what your intro was. Is I think I'm going to need an early winnings report here, because I think Atlanta, like right now, if it was going to lock in an hour, it'd be my top hitting team.
Yeah, I think that's what people will do. I completely get it. It's Matt Moore. I'm actually really surprised at the run total being below 5 here. I know Moore has been a little bit better than expected, and people got you've mentioned this a lot with the guys who have tricks. The way I always say it is, if this guy was once a great pitcher, don't we think that there's a chance that like maybe he's still pretty good? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's also weird to see like I don't know. My early projections have Jock Peterson over 20% owned against a lefty. That is probably one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I mean, this guy literally went while he was hitting 30 home runs for the Dodgers,
he would get subbed out against lefties.
Well, they don't have they're down bodies. You know what I mean? He's replaced Acuna. I don't even know that he'll play today, but I certainly don't expect him to. I mean, I don't know. It'd be very weird of Atlanta to lead him off and have all that ownership. I don't think that's going to happen by the end of the day.
No, I don't think so.
I'm with you on your natural thoughts. The problem is I'd like to get a little different. I actually think Morton might be lower owned than maybe he has been on this slate. So I do have him pretty highly rated as a pitcher. I'm not going to play any Matt Moore. I will play some Atlanta, but I'm going to be mixing them in. I like the Freeman and the lefty. I like Dansby Swanson is expensive now. I'd rather play Austin Riley if I had to choose between the two of them. I also like shortstop a little better than third base in general. Albies would be one of the premier plays to me. But I think that what you do is if you're going to play this stack, you get in some Heredia and you maybe even some Orlando Arcia at short as a pivot off of Swanson. Those guys should be single-digit ownerships and will allow you to do something different. And meanwhile, Heredia has actually not been all that bad this year. So you put him up against the lefty here. I actually think this is a decent enough spot where if you're going to take the stack and go for it all the way, include Heredia, include Arcia. And I have a little link down to my stacks. I'm going to start adding this to the site in probably the next week or two, but where I'm going to have my favorite stacks, and then I'm going to have the guys who you have to get different in those stacks. So anyway, so I'm with you. Atlanta and Morton definitely makes sense. I think on the other side, as much as I like Morton as a pitcher, and it's a smaller slate, I have no problem taking shots on McCutchen at 3,700. I have no problem taking shots on overpaying for Bryce or Didi at first glance, but none of them are priorities. They're just guys I could use to get different, which is going to come up a lot on this small slate. All right. Go ahead. Start it off with San Diego and Miami.
Yeah, I think that first of all, who do we have? Zach Thompson pitching. Just so you guys know, I didn't have anything on the pitchers over here, so I don't have anything. I didn't have anything in my sheets yet, but I will change that. But with respect to Blake Snell, I think probably the first thing you'll notice if you're a premium subscriber, you see my sheets today, probably the biggest outlier there is my ownership projection as of this moment is way too low. I mean, like I can't imagine him not being huge chalk.
Who's that?
Snell.
Oh, I have him pretty high. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right now, like my sheets have him like 16%. I mean, he's gonna be like 30 plus. I mean, that's 7,800 against Miami is like, that's just the way it's gonna be.
You're right, and it brings up a really good question. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think this is interesting. I am very much on, okay, what are we really doing with Snell anymore? I mean, I really am like, it's concerning, man. This guy has 1 20-point outing in his last 5, 2 in his last 7, 2 in his last 8, 3 in his last, 12. And yes, it is a great matchup. This is not the same Blake Snell we saw last year. I think his arm may have gotten a little bit worn out to the long season and the postseason. And he's always been a guy they've always had, pitch counts on it, both in San Diego and in Tampa. I look, naturally, I look at this and I go, I want to play Blake Snell. But then you start looking at it and you think about the chalk, and I'm just going, God, does this really make as much sense? Is he really just a different guy? I think it's going to become a popular topic you'll hear throughout different shows throughout the day, whether or not Blake Snell is really Blake Snell anymore, or at least at the moment. I think he's going to have a great career. I think he'll be back. I'm just saying he has not been right this year. At times, though, he's dazzling. But mostly he's been pretty blah with a lot of downside. So I just want to throw that out there before we just think, oh, Blake Snell's awesome because he's 7,800. That's just wanted to throw that out there.
So I have a couple of things. Number one is, if slate locked in an hour, right? I have Blake Snell as, and I mentioned this earlier, I have him as just a guy. I have like 5 pitchers, maybe even 6, that I could make a case for, all shuffled. And if Snell is going to end up being that much chalkier than all of them, I have no problem being under on him and avoiding him in my bigger lineup.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is that there was one time a couple of days ago, I forget who Miami was playing, but you were on the pitcher against him when you're like, this Miami lineup is just atrocious, and then last night, freaking Fetty, who basically is just a batting practice pitcher against like half the league, he put up a good score against Miami. Like Miami's really bad. So that's the only thing I would say is that both things can be true. I mean, Snell might not be the same guy and yet still be an elite play at 7,800. That's the only thing that I would say about that. But I think as you are getting to, I mean, ownership's going to drive that analysis. Like if he's 15% owned, I'll make that case. If he's 35% owned, I'll say, you know what I mean? I'll fade him. So that I think we're both kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah. So I just have like the thing that's interesting is that Miami, I actually think that they're underrated in general, but this is not even their full team. Garrett Cooper, right, who's great against lefties, is not in the lineup. Jazz Chisholm, probably their best player going forward, other than maybe Marte, is not in the lineup anymore. And there's just some, I think that if you're not going to play Snell, I think Adam Duvall and Jorge Alfaro make for terrific plays, especially Alfaro at 2,500. The only thing is if you're going to play against Snell, I always like to get a guy who can steal a base, and they made these guys really expensive on DraftKings. Like Marte is 5,200. I would absolutely say Marte was like, if he was like 3K or 35, I'm sorry, if he was like 3,900 or 4,200 or something, I think it would make a lot more sense because that stolen base then means a lot more to your upside. I just don't think I would like to take bats against Snell, and it's hard for me to get to those prices, but just to get some leverage on these smaller slates. But like you said, maybe he is just a guy. And then we've got on the other side, the guy who actually has been awesome, Zach Thompson.
Oh shoot, I gotta look at him, huh?
So, well, I'm just going to say so in his 6 starts this year, the first one was sort of a bring me up start. So I'm not going to count that one. He only pitched 3 innings, but then he even in 5, he's shown tremendous strikeout ability. And this was twice against Atlanta, full team Atlanta, by the way. He put up 25 and 15 and 16 in those games. I'm more making an argument why San Diego might be a little bit less exciting to stack. But also he put up 31 against Washington, had 11 strikeouts in 6 innings in that game. Against the Cubs, he had 7 strikeouts in 4 innings. He's still not pitching deep into games, but he has been effective. I'm not going to use him. Maybe, if I'm playing a ton of lineups, I'll end up throwing him into one. But I think that it does make a little bit less exciting what I thought would be a little bit more popular of an offense. San Diego struggled since they scored those 24 runs the other day. But I would, if these ownerships are really right for San Diego will become a priority stack, even with that Zach Thompson goodness, because they're a patient team. I don't think it matters what stadium they play in. Their home team, their home court field is one of the worst hitters parks in baseball. So playing in Miami is not all that bad for them. And Zach Thompson, and you've got expensive guys over here that might be hard to get to, but outside of Tatis and Grisham, I don't think they're going to be very popular. So I'm sort of contradicting myself, but I think San Diego's interesting if they're going to be low owned. If they're not going to be low owned, I'm more than happy to fade that situation. But I think that because of how bad I think Miami's bullpen is, even though there's some skepticism on that, and some people say it's good, whatever. I'll just tell you that they're combustible. I personally, so I have San Diego as a stack that I may end up by the end of the day either having none of or having all of. But I think it's somewhere in between is probably right. But I really am intrigued by these low ownerships. If that's going to be the case, anytime San Diego is going to be low owned on a small slate, there's a few offenses in baseball. There's the Dodgers, Blue Jays, Padres, and Red Sox that I feel like stand out for upside. The Dodgers are not quite fully healthy right now, but in general, they're my favorite upside lineups in general. And I think that getting them at low ownership because of the stadium, even if this game was in San Diego, I think you'd see more ownership on the Padres. I really can get behind them if they're going to be low owned. If they're not, I'm happy to fade them.
Yeah, I'm currently fading them, but again, I have to look at all this again later with the San Diego.
Yeah.
Just one other thing, by the way, I was going to because I'll forget to mention this after we stop. Guys, if on Saturday I thought that I was going to have to tell you guys that I'm not going to be able to come up with projections for Saturday's slate, but I looked ahead at the slate, and really the main is not till 7 o'clock at night. There's very, very few games, if any, during the early afternoon. So I'll be able to take care of that.
That'd be awesome.
But yeah. there'll be some times that it's just not going to happen.
And I'll step in and do my best with more detailed picks and talk you guys through everything that you have any thoughts or questions about or projection ideas. And I can, I can do my best sheets fill in that I can, but I can't do the same exact projections that you run.
Okay. All right. You want to move ahead?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Why don't you start us off with the next one? I just got a little problem. For some reason, my DraftKings is not loading.
See, I have one thing that's obvious and one thing that's not. The obvious thing for me is I do like both hitting environments here. I like Boston and the Yankees on DraftKings. They're two of my top 4 stacks alongside of Atlanta and somebody else. And I actually like the Yankees specifically on FanDuel as well. I want to ask you if you had any interest in the Boston pitcher in Houck at 5,300. He's just on the outside looking in as far as my pitching values go. I didn't really look at him all too much. He just kind of shows up. So the hitting for me is kind of easy. I like both hitting environments, and I was going to look into this Houck thing a little more.
Yeah. It's really hard for me with the Yankees right now, just because even when they're getting there, it's just yes, Glaber hit a home run yesterday. That's pretty amazing. I think they're going to have ownership today. my natural instinct is to try to fade them at any sort of ownership. The one guy, if people are really going to stop playing Odor, though, he's going to be a play that I'll go to because he's hitting the ball well. I love the power upside. Obviously better in Yankee Stadium than Boston for lefties, but they're both great hitters' parks. Stanton is just frighteningly cheap at this point, and I think people are starting to notice big time. So I think he'll be really popular. I have some interest in the Yankees. I just don't know that I want to make this a priority at high ownership. I play the ownership game so much more on these smaller slates than I do on the big slates because it makes more sense to. I also think Boston's going to have reasonable ownership, and Montgomery's I still think he's a decent pitcher. What I would say is if you're going to play Boston, and I said this yesterday when I was referring to the Boston stack, even though you didn't need to get different if you wanted to play it, Rafael Devers is really good against lefties. Look at his career. Not necessarily. Don't take the small samples. Take the long ones or take the really small one and take yesterday, the home run off Ray. I think that you try and get Devers in there if you're going to make the stack because I think it'll be popular. But Kike is one of the best plays on the slate in my opinion. They're not raising his price. He's absolutely on fire. He's crushing these lefties left and right. He's hit 3 home runs the last 2 days. He's only 3,800 on DraftKings, 32 on FanDuel. I also really like Hunter Renfroe, but he'll get some ownership, I think, a little bit more than Kike because he's down to 3K. Bobby Dahlbeck, I even have projected with a lot of ownership today. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Boston lineup shakes out. One thing you did in your main FanDuel lineup, which I thought was pretty ballsy, especially because it was a smaller FanDuel slate. Well, and I thought I was being ballsy too. I played Dahlbeck and you played Chavez. And I think that going back to those guys would be your way of getting a little different. Right now, I've got Chavis as a lot less lower owned. I said Chavez, I meant Chavis. A lot less owned than Dahlbeck for some reason. And I don't really understand why that would be the case, especially with Chavis with the multi-position eligibility. So if you're going to stack Boston, I would encourage you to try and include Devers, Dahlbeck, and/or Chavis, something like that to try and get different.
Yeah, I think this is a game you're going to want to play some of. So,
yeah, it definitely looks like a great hitting environment, and I haven't checked the umpire data yet or anything. Well, no, we don't have it yet. But you know what's interesting about this Hoke guy?
Yeah,
I'm gonna take the flip side of this. I think that there's going to be a time today where I'm definitely considering using him.
Okay.
He's got a 5K prop. He's 5,300. Now it's probably the wrong slate. Yesterday I liked the Manning thing, so I could pay up for my Red Sox and Blue Jays. And Manning was great, by the way. That ended up being maybe one of the better calls I had of the day. I mean, he put up 20 fantasy points or 19 and a half fantasy points at 4K, 40, whatever, 100. Hoke, I think he has some strikeout stuff in him. They don't really have much of a leash, and it's a smaller slate though, so I'm willing to take that chance a little bit more. So I'll do some more digging into Hoke, but I do that 5K prop really jumped out at me, and for 5,300, it could allow you to maybe get a little bit different. I don't think I can go to Montgomery against a team with this many great lefty crushers. As usual, as I will say every day against lefty, and the best play on the slate, in my opinion, is JD Martinez. At least of all the guys we've talked about so far. There's just I just can't help myself with him. If he's facing a lefty, if he's facing anybody honestly right now, and he's 4,400, and people are going to play Stanton over him, I just am going to always play JD Martinez in that spot. He's just a much better hitter at this point than Stanton is. That's where I'm at.
You want to move ahead?
Tampa Bay, Cleveland. I'll start this one off if you want. Okay. I'm not going to play Patino. I think some people will consider him as the spend down option. I would rather take a shot with Hoke, and in the Yankees team that I still very much question. But what I am interested in here is the Tampa Bay side of things. I think that I don't think all that much of Quantrill. I don't think he's the worst, but I think he's very hittable. And I think you're going to get a lot of ownership on Lowe and Meadows. But I'm not sure outside of them that you'll get much ownership at all. And I'm just going to remind everybody, I know it's been against lefties, but Randy Arozarena sure looks pretty good lately. I mean, he's hit 3 home runs his last 2 games as well. You can get different by playing Arozarena and Franco, and even Zunino in your stacks. So I really like trying to get, if you're going to get the stacks, try and get those guys in. I do have Tampa Bay rated on my stacks as reasonably high. But I partly because I feel like I can get, 3 guys at less than 10% ownership that I really like, which would be Franco, Arozarena, and Zunino especially. That's my argument for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I have Tampa as tied with Atlanta for my top stack.
Okay.
I have Tampa as getting a decent amount of ownership. But as you were saying, you don't have to take the highest owned guys of the team.
Right.
I had as the best plays, whatever. Kiermaier, Meadows, Lowe, Choi, Arozarena. But you mentioned Franco. But Kiermaier 2100's kind of, he's always really cheap.
He's always really cheap because he doesn't do all that much, but he can steal. He'll steal you a base. I promise you this: if he gets on base, you're at least going to have like a 50% chance that he goes. He just never gets on base.
Go ahead. And he probably not going to get subbed out for because he plays good defense. So I like Tampa. It's just the question of balancing ownership with everything else. If Tampa, who do you think is going to be more popular, Tampa or Atlanta?
Atlanta.
Okay.
I mean, outside of Meadows and Lowe, I honestly don't know if anybody on Tampa goes more than 10% outside of Meadows, Lowe. Maybe they do get that there with the Arozarena because he's been hot and he's doing well. So, yeah. But I think that Atlanta's got a bunch of guys, at least early on, that seem to be projecting to be way up there. But we'll get some fine-tuned ownership later. And Sheets won't be with us at 6 Eastern, but I'll be here with you guys, and we'll do our our fun little small game slate, and maybe we'll have an argument like last week we did on what's the best White Claw flavor. We could talk about the best coffee flavor this week because I'm not drinking anything this week. So, all right. I do want to mention on the Cleveland side, I think that. I think everybody's in play and will be overlooked. I don't want to stack this team, but I think Bradley Zimmer is really, really. I mean, if he's going to continue leading off at 2.4K, I'm definitely going to have some interest there. And guys got some speed, a little bit of pop that we've seen in the past. And you have a really cheap options here. The other guy, Cesar Hernandez, for me is a great pivot off of the Lowe chalk. I think that Lowe is going to be really popular. And I think you can play Cesar Hernandez instead.
Well, I like, Lowe with the multiple position eligibility, but I think Albies is probably a bit more ownership than Lowe, no?
Okay, Albies and Lowe chalk then.
Yeah.
Maybe. Feels like every time Lowe's chalk, he gets a home run.
You could play Kiki at 3,800 too at second base.
Yeah. That's true.
Or, you could play if you wanted to. I mean, we're talking about some second base pivots. You mentioned him before as Odor, huh?
Yeah, Odor. You know what? Second base might be a little stronger today than usual. It's been the second base and third base have been like the death positions lately. But tonight they seem to actually be pretty strong. Even like Cronenworth as well. So a lot of second basemen out there that are up there. We'll sort of revisit all of my favorites at the end. We got an interesting one here with this Chicago-St. Louis game. You have a very low total, and you have 2 pitchers who aren't projected to do anything at all, especially from a strikeout perspective. It's a small slate. I don't mind if anybody wants to do anything here. I will do my normal thing with the Cubs. They're guys who hit lefties really well. Javier Baez is really expensive, which will keep him unowned almost entirely. I don't mind taking that home run shot on him at short. Chris Bryant, always been good against lefties. Nothing's changed. If you wanted to, obviously Rizzo, I always say it doesn't matter if he's facing a lefty. I still think that holds true, but I don't think you need to force in a stack here. But Wisdom, Baez, and Contreras, I have all as interesting one-off plays.
Yeah, the only thing that I have from this whole game, I didn't have any of the pitching. I'm not stacking either of it. I do have a one-off 3,100 Dylan Carlson from St. Louis. That's pretty much all that I had interest in here.
Yeah, Carlson. It's Carlson will be chalky, but I don't mind. I don't mind that. I think maybe you're better off if you're going to try to get somebody. I personally would. Tyler O'Neill tends to have a little more power. Maybe I would go that route. But I think both of them are definitely interesting for sure. And it's funny because you see the guys that are cheap and they always tend to get more ownership. But like 3,100 versus 3,600, that 500 you probably can find somewhere on this kind of a slate. And and no one else plays all the great bats, all the good bats from St. Louis. So just anytime you want to play them on a small slate, I'm never going to say as a one-off that anybody's a mistake from this lineup. I think they're all completely legitimate plays, even spending all the way up for Arenado at third at a position that I'm not as crazy about today outside of Machado. All right, so Angels and Twins. Someone's going to have to explain this incredibly high run line for me. I'm guessing that the weather, well, it looks like the weather is great hitting weather. Maeda, they're just not giving enough leash to for me to play him. They really are pulling him early as he's pitching really well. We're looking at games that would have been in the 25s or 30s possibly, and just coming out after those 5 innings, and he's looked great. I mean, he's really looked really good his last 3 starts. He had the one outing against KC where they let him go a little bit because he got his 10 Ks. But even then, he wasn't like crazy in terms of pitch count. I don't understand exactly why this game is so high run total wise, but I do think that I like the idea of playing Minnesota against Heaney, and I like the idea of playing Heaney at much less ownership than we've seen at 6,900. I don't think he's going to see it just because the other team's at the highest run total on the slate. And Minnesota does have some great lefty crushers. They're going to be popular. Cruz, Donaldson, Garver, even Polanco's been red hot. Like, he's going to be fairly popular. If you're going to do it, I would suggest including the lefties, maybe either Kepler or Larnach, to try and get a little bit different with your stack. But I do understand with Heaney, you want to stack against or play him, and that certainly makes sense to me tonight. I'm not getting to the Angels at all, and I don't even understand why their run total is this high. The only one I would go after would be Shohei, and he's going to be popular. I just can't find myself excited about anybody else on their team.
Yeah, I had a little bit of this game. I thought Heaney was playable, and yet, as you mentioned, I think Minnesota's playable. I think that the Angels are somewhat playable. They're not like a priority for me, but certainly, I certainly have, some mild interest in them. I was going to ask you about the guy I thought that you were going to like that I didn't get to was Maeda, but as you mentioned, I wasn't even aware of this, so it seems though they're not giving him the leash that he's accustomed to.
I feel like it could change. It could change at any point. Just is odd. Like, these are American League games that he's been pitching in, and he pitched well, and they just pulled him with. Let me grab it. I can't actually grab my draft. Don't refresh your page, whatever you do, because I can't load DraftKings at all. I'm guessing it's a DraftKings issue.
It is.
So okay, that's so I can't even. I'm having trouble even getting his pitch count from the last game.
Can't get anything. Yeah.
All right. Let's. But I think that that's definitely a game you want to keep an eye on, just because the hitting weather is good enough to where it makes sense. And maybe an off the board Jared Walsh play or something would be okay against Maeda. I'm okay with that. Dodgers and Giants. So look, there's a lot of guys who we feel like even McCullers last night is a great example. They're not going to let him battle out of a jam when they're in a tight game. The Dodgers will let Walker Buehler battle out of every tight jam. He's if he gets into too many, obviously, and he's struggling, maybe he'll come out. He's just such a consistent pitcher. He's going to be popular. I have him as the easiest. Like, if I was playing cash today, he would be my first place I'd start with as far as pitchers go. I think you can find enough value out there. And Descalfani, who's been good this year, is a guy who the Dodgers profile to absolutely destroy, but this is not the same Dodger lineup. So it'll be interesting to see who gets in tonight. Justin Turner didn't play last night because he's injured, but he pinch hit. So he's probably going to come out and play today. They're really expensive, the Dodgers, again. I will probably be doing some Dodger stuff. And my favorites, even though they're struggling, Cody Bellinger. Chris Taylor has been awesome. I don't know if I can do it at 5,400 on this slate, but I'm open to it. Muncy and Bellinger, along with Pollock, would be my favorite plays. Unless we get, again, even though he didn't do anything yesterday, it's one day. If we get Matt Beattie back in the lineup, I'd be happy to go back after him.
I think Buehler is one of those pitchers, along with, for me, Snell, Morton, Haney, and we'll get to the last guy in a minute. But I think Buehler certainly, like you said, even though he looks to be more, significantly more expensive than these other guys. I mean, I think he's good for 15 to 20. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that that's the limit. I'm not saying that's the limit he's going to have, but I think he's good for 15 to 20. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't really get to much of the Dodgers, and the only thing I would say as one-offs is I think that Alex Dickerson at 2,700, if you wanted to do that, is cheap. But not my favorite game to attack, honestly.
Yeah, well, the worry with Buehler, he'll give up some stolen bases. He just doesn't give up that much power at all. He's had a couple games where he gave up some home runs, but I mean, it's been 4 starts in a row. It's actually in his last 7 starts. Yeah, 7 starts. He's given up home runs in 1 game, which he had 2 in that game. But he's just really good at limiting damage, and I really like him. And a neutral pitcher's ump there, but I do have Buehler as my number 1 pitcher right now, along with the guy in our next game.
You really like flexing that much, huh?
I knew you were going to do that. I'm going to. Okay, so I'm just going to say if the ownership gets too high, which I think it's going to, I really like Manea. He was initially, I think, like I said, I think there's plenty of value out there today. He would be the other guy who I think has like a really high ceiling against the Seattle offense. But, you look at it, I mean, the truth is the last time he pitched against this guy, he pitched a complete game. What was it? It was a 4-hit shutout or something. And last time he pitched against him, the Seattle team doesn't really have an answer for him, but if he's going to be really chalky, he can get himself into trouble with working up pitch counts and things like that. Now the Seattle team may not be the best to take advantage of that, but I don't mind fading him if he's going to be like more than 50% owned. And I personally will not take Chris Flexen off my list just based on the fact that he's just consistently been good. That's it. That's my pitching thoughts. What are you doing here?
Yeah, he's one of my top 5.
Which one?
Manea.
Manea.
I like him a lot. I mean, like I said, doesn't take a genius. He's a good pitcher against a bad hitting team. You know what I mean? Everybody attacks Seattle every game. And I do think he's going to get owned, but it's fine by me. I mean, is this a worse play than Snell? I don't know. I'll flip a coin on that one. I mean, yeah, Snell's cheaper.
Price difference, yeah.
Snell's cheaper, but I think that his that the concerns that you bring up about he just might not be right are valid. So I guess, and those 2 and Morton, I think all 3 of those are good plays, right? I don't know. You really like Buehler the best, huh?
Yeah, I mean, he's the one I feel the most comfortable with, but like my most comfortable would be Buehler, Morton, Manea, and the other guys I don't feel as comfortable with, but the Heaney, Snell, and then I've got Houck and Flexen as my long shot guy. So if I was going to make a chalkier stack tonight, a Flexen or a Houck might end up in it. Oakland only has a 4-run total. Flexen's been good. He's just been consistently really good. And I still think Oakland bats are the better way to go. They should get Mark Hanna back tonight. Lineup sort of coming back into full steam. I think Matt Olsen is a great pivot off of Ohtani at first base, and he's going to be low owned. So I do have Olsen as a highly rated play, but he's obviously very expensive. And I think Ramon Laureano, who I don't know what they're doing with their order. I should never question them because they always play well, but I know he struggled for a little bit, but he's sort of found himself again a little bit the last couple of days. And I think that Laureano is an interesting play, but I probably am mostly just going to be on the pitching in this one.
Me too.
All right. So let's highlight. I guess I'll go on my favorite. I'm still debating between what is my actual favorite stack here. But I do think Atlanta, San Diego. I'm starting to lean San Diego if the ownership doesn't come up on them. Atlanta, San Diego, Tampa, and the Dodgers and Boston. I have currently in that order. Some of that has to do with ownership, but I don't know that I'm going to to have that same opinion by 6 Eastern, because I want to see some things. I want to see some umpire stats, and I want to really get some confirmation on some of these ownership things that I feel like are really spread out right now. Because that's going to dictate a lot for me, especially on the smaller slates in baseball. The bigger slates, I don't worry as much, but I consider it a huge thing on smaller slates. Buehler, Morton, Minaya, as I mentioned, my favorites. I'm looking more into Houck, and then you've got Snell, Heaney, and Flexen. If Heaney's really low owned, I'll take a shot there, because I think he might be with that. Oh, I forgot to put Minnesota as one of my stacks. Sorry, they actually, it's funny. I said I'm interested in Heaney, but I have Minnesota as my number 2 stack actually, as of right now. Because I think that, there's not a whole lot of offenses that are projected to go crazy tonight. If there was any, it would probably be Minnesota or San Diego, in my opinion. But I think this might be another one of those 4-2-2 or something like that kind of stack nights for me, because these smaller slates, I like to do that. And I also think that there's not an offense that I feel so good about just completely going nuts. And on those slates, I tend to do more of the 4-2-2 stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
So that's it. That's what I got.
Yeah, for me, DraftKings, again, I have a big log jam between Snell, Minaya, Buehler, Morton, and Heaney. And then in hitting, Tampa, Atlanta, Boston, New York, and the Little Angels. On FanDuel, which you didn't go over too much, I like Snell and Minaya, my 2 over there. Then and then hitting, Tampa, Minnesota, New York, and Yankees, and Atlanta.
Yep.
And that's it.
Yeah, I'll quickly just say a few one-offs. JD Martinez, Kike, 2 off there you can take for Boston. Matt Olsen as a low-owned one-off. Bellinger as a low-owned one-off. Arozarena, Stanton, Odor, Duvall, Tyler O'Neill, Patrick Wisdom. And then for value, I have Heredia, Alfaro, Zimmer, Carlson, and Beatty. As I dig a little bit more in, I'm about to update my sheets and my projected ownerships of the ownerships I'll have on each player. And you guys can check that out on truedfs.com. People are signing up, by the way, guys. We're doing a 1-month free trial for people. If people want to try that out, and let us know what you think. And I think you'll find sheets are worth it enough. But we have a lot of content on there that we're adding, and should be a lot of good stuff to check out. But that's what I've got for my one-offs. Sheets, anything else before we get out of here?
Nope.
All right. Good luck to everyone tonight. Hope you all crush it, and let us know how you do. I'll be in Discord all night, and let's make some money.